Let us now join a stuttering group in session. These people are in the early stages of group therapy, one of many meetings in which they will gain the confidence and self-assurance that is such an important factor in the successful treatment of stuttering.
And you've already made a lot of changes. You used to be a very severe stutterer, indeed, and I wonder what some of your goals are now. Before you state them, I wonder if you could give us a sample of what your stuttering was like. So we have members of the group here who are in different stages, and you've been working on your speech quite a long time and started from way back.
I will I will be glad to, Dr. Sheehan. Leonard Robin is the way I used to stutter. I haven't been doing that for quite some time. There have been a number of advantages to not doing that, one of which is my neck muscles have gotten smaller, and so I've been able to also now wear a smaller shirt size. As you spoke of the iceberg, Dr. Sheen, I think this is extremely important because I find if I am not working on my stuttering and going out and meeting people and talking with people, that this iceberg is sort of a floating thing. And if I really am not actively trying to work on my stuttering, the iceberg begins to sink lower and lower and lower. And the only way I can bring it up to the surface is to get out and really talk to people and really go into as many difficult, challenging situations as I can find.
You find that actually getting out and talking to people, talking more and to more people really helps you.
Oh yes, it not only helps me there, it also helps me to be more accepted as a member of many groups. I still find, though, that I have more trouble when I get into a group with very fluent people who are constantly interrupting and trying to compete with these fluent people in a very verbal situation is difficult for me.
To try to get the floor to hold it.
Right, it's very hard.
Yeah. And people will put you under time pressure, too. They won't really wait. Everybody talks in this world of ours, and very few people listen.
Right.
If they do listen, they listen impatiently, waiting to speak.
One of these situations that has always given me the problem of the time pressure situation is the telephone, of picking up the telephone receiver and trying to say hello and taking so much time to say the word, whereas some people would hang up. And it's very embarrassing and very discouraging.
You've had people hang up on you then, hmm?
Yes, I have.
One thing that makes me sort of unhappy is when I call another stutterer who has been working on his stuttering or has not been working on his stuttering, and he does not say hello on the telephone. I don't care how long it takes, but it really makes me unhappy when he says yes in a very glib way.
I agree. I used to say yes, too. It's a miserable thing to do.
So did I.
Biggest grudge in the world.
I've done that, too, or else he just uses a silent block. You know, this gag about if you call on the phone and nobody answers, don't hang up, that's me. Sometimes people recognize us on the phone immediately because they can hear some stuttering sounds. Ever had that happen to you?
Yes.
Say hello, Steve.
I remember I could never say hello on the phone also, and so what I did was make it a lot harder for myself. I said, friendly residents, morning speaking, 8416 McConnell Avenue. Because I couldn't say hello, but I could say that.
That is, you took the role of somebody more official.
Yes.
You weren't being yourself.
Right, and I could say that perfectly, but I couldn't say, just pick up the phone and say hello.
Have you ever done that in other ways, taken a role or tried to be somebody other than yourself in order to speak more easily, more fluently, for the time being?
Oh, I've done it many a time. Like in high school, I was on the speech and debate team, and I gave an original oratory in front of a contest, and I got an award in it. I didn't have any trouble at all speaking because I was in a position of authority, and I wasn't myself speaking. I was maybe an actor in front of a group. I don't know what I considered myself, but I know I didn't think
You
of
found
myself.
if you get away from yourself, you could be fluent. I did that once in high school, took a role as foreman of the jury, And all those who knew me thought the verdict would never be delivered, but somehow as foreman of the jury, I wasn't myself, and I was able to deliver that one very easily. Wonder if some of you have had other experiences of...
I was installed one time when I was in high school as the president of an organization, and there was quite a large gathering, and at the installation I was perfectly fluent, had no problems at all, and then the next week there was a somewhat the same thing, and I went up and it was just the opposite. It was completely the opposite. Everything that had previously been fluent was just a jumble of stuttering and holding back. And
isn't that the trouble with this playing false roles, that it all catches up with you, that you can pretend to be somebody else for a while, but there comes a time when you get close to yourself in those same roles. It's like other tricks or crutches. I wonder if you might mention some of the other tricks or crutches that you've used to cover up stuttering, some of the things submerged down in that iceberg. For example, I used to substitute words, or I'd pretend to think sometimes, or change an entire sentence around. Those used to be some of my crutches.
One crutch that I used to use, I live in La Jolla, and at that time, somebody asked me where I lived, and I used to say I lived in a city down by the beach near San Diego. Never to say where I lived, always to describe it, because it was so difficult to say La Jolla.
It was actually, rather than to say this short little phrase, La Jolla, it was easier to say these 2 or 3 long phrases that somehow avoided the key word you're having trouble with.
That's right.
You could anticipate then. You could actually tell in advance that you're going to stutter on that word. You anticipate and then avoid. Take a detour, huh?
Exactly.
One crutch I used to use is I used to take my 2 fingers and put them together and go like that in order to push out the words. This worked pretty well for a time, but after a while I was pushing my fingers together 2 and 3 and 4 times just to say a single word. And I finally decided to break this habit because my 2 fingers were getting so bloody that and it was getting quite painful at the same time.
You show that sign language is no answer
No,
to
it is
stutter.
not.
Huh? Okay. Well, what are some of your crutches, Andy?
Once, while I was in Spanish class, a friend of mine would sit behind me, and when I was called on, and I had a block, she would tap the back of my seat 3 times, and I'd say it. Big help.
That is, she was providing you a distraction.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't go around with somebody
No,
tapping you
it
3
didn't
times.
work for long.
It's only temporary, isn't that the way you found distractions? It's not usually what happens. Depends on novelty that wears off.
one of my crutches was that I'd never keep eye contact with anybody, whether I was fluent or having a block, and I'd also blink my eyes as a way of releasing the words, and I trust that I've overcome that by now, at least large part of it.
Have you found that monitoring, that keeping exact track of what it is you do when you stutter really begins to help? That is, one reason that you stutter as you do is that it's become habituated and you don't know exactly what it is you do when you stutter. And it's unpleasant, so we cut off the feedback. We don't really listen to ourselves. We don't really look at it. And we hide up we hide the stuttering. We cover it up from others, but also, most of all, from ourselves. We fool ourselves about stuttering. And to take a pretty good look at it just within yourself, have you found that to be helpful? Or maybe to do as you're doing right now, to take an inventory of crutches. Is there such a thing as a complete cure for stuttering? If by complete cure you mean that the individual will never hesitate again, that's impossible because that's part of normal speech. But if by complete cure you mean overcoming the handicap, then it's possible, and a great many people have done it. Here is one, and I'm going to put the pressure on him by asking him to introduce himself, to say his own name, which is often very hard for a stutterer.
My name is Jim Sheldon, and I've been working with Dr. Sheehan for about 2 years now.
I wonder if you'd give us an example of your old pattern of stuttering. As of about 2 years ago, how might you have stuttered, Jim?
Well, I think I can do that very readily. If I was going to say, my name is Jim Sheldon.
Can you feel some of the old tension coming back as you do that?
I certainly can.
Now, you've gone out into situations and done a great many different things, and I wonder if you would tell us about one of them, which is one of the more dramatic things you've done, that is to join the Toastmasters Club. Can you tell us about that?
I'd like to very much. I've been a member of Toastmasters for approximately a year now, and I think that it has probably made more, it has been more help to me than any other thing that I could have done, because it gave me the necessary challenge that I needed.
But what have you done? What have you done in Toastmasters and in general? What have you done about your stuttering?
I've just tried to be more open about it, and at this point I can improve on the finer points of speaking now, but the fact of being open, not substituting words, being very straightforward, has really helped me more than anything.
Can you give us an example of one of your talks at the Toastmasters Club? Not to go through the whole talk, but just how you might approach it.
Yes, I would come up to the lectern, acknowledge my introduction from the Toastmaster, and begin like this. Fellow Toastmasters, what I am going to speak to you about tonight concerns all of us here.
All right, that's fine. That's a very good example. What advice would you have for a stutterer who couldn't get therapy? What sort of philosophy have you found useful for a stutterer in your own experience?
I think the most important thing would be not to avoid a situation just for the sake of getting around any stuttering. When you avoid, you're not doing yourself any good, and I think that being straightforward and open is the only way to do it.
How comfortable are you about your speaking now? How do you feel about yourself as a speaker?
I feel much better now as a speaker because I know that even though I might have some very minor bobbles and occasionally a fairly serious one, that I can handle the situation fine and I don't have the same old feelings about it.
All right, thank you. Well, is this man cured? It depends on what you mean by cure, but he certainly has overcome his handicap. The experience of stuttering is an unpleasant one, and as a result of this, the stutterer represses what he's doing. He covers up his stuttering from himself, most of all, not just from other people. To overcome this, we stress in therapy monitoring, listening to yourself, watching yourself. In the past, we've used mirror work and audio tape recordings for this purpose. Television opens up a new dimension, the opportunity to look at yourself on video, and we'll now see our group in terms of their reactions to their earlier taping done a couple of months ago. Here we are 3 months later, meeting as a group. We've had some change in membership. We just had an opportunity to see ourselves as we were before, to get a good look at how we sounded and at what we were doing. And I wonder what reactions. Candy, do you have any reactions to confronting yourself on this?
Yes, I noticed a big difference in my speech. Before, I was holding back and reforming in order to not stutter. But now I just forge ahead and stutter,
Now,
and it's easier.
As you're stuttering at the moment, you're still stuttering but more comfortably and more openly.
Yes.
But not as hard, not with as much struggle
No,
as you
not
were
at all.
before. Jim, you're a new member of the group. How does it feel to realize that you're not alone?
It's a great feeling to be in a group of other people with the same problem. And after watching this tape, and seeing how these other individuals are striving to overcome their trouble, it gives me a lot of courage to go on and to gradually overcome this.
We can begin to see some of the crutches that Jim uses that he's going to have to start working on as a new member of the group. You also said that you could quote Shakespeare and take a role and be fluent. Can you give us a sample of that?
Yes, Dr. Sheehan. It'll be a pleasure. Cowards die many times before their death. The valiant ne'er taste of death but once. Of all the wonders that I yet have heard, it seems to me most strange that men should fear.
Okay, far enough. You see, he has a bit of ham in him too, just as most of us who stutter. You have to become a ham in a way because you have to play so many different roles, play so many false roles. But even though you're able to be that fluent, it doesn't really affect you. When you have a fear, you still have lots of trouble then,
Yes.
isn't that so?
Yes, I do. It's something I can't explain. It just it happens. I can't. I just have this feeling, that's down the pit of my stomach that I'm going to stutter, and by golly, I do.
When you stutter, you often get the feeling that this is something that happens to you. One of the things you have to realize in therapy, this is something that we do. And I wonder, to return to our television viewing, I wonder how you felt, Maureen, as you saw yourself as of a few months ago.
Well, actually, I thought I was a lot more fluent 3 months ago than I now realized that I was.
You mean you were worse than you thought?
Yes. I realized that I was holding back a lot. My speech was very choppy, and I could see how much I tensed up in the fact that I was grabbing onto my armchair for my dear life and everything. And now, in these past few months, I've begun to accept myself more as a stutterer.
And part of this acceptance, you might notice, Jim, is the way she says it. She's describing things that she's doing, and she's accepting some responsibility. She's doing the doing. Whereas when you were referring to it, it sounded as though this was something happening to you, and maybe this is one of the first things you can begin to learn. But George, what reactions do you have to seeing George as of a few weeks ago?
Well, I saw my nostrils flare up many times, which I didn't realize before. And
You mean you didn't realize you were doing it?
No, I didn't. It's hard to see yourself when you talk. So I feel much more comfortable now when I talk, and I maintain better eye contact than I used to.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel right now in this situation?
I feel I have much less tensions than I did.
You still have some. You're still working
Yes.
on some, though.
Yes.